Welcome back to the Wiley Coyote Project. In this episode, I will be taking all of this and installing it in the white Mustang. If you're new to the channel, welcome. And what I'm doing is basically taking this 2009, and it started off as a V6 Mustang, and I'm converting it to a 5-liter GT. And all the components that are making it into the 5-liter GT have come off this 2014 donor Mustang that was in an accident and could no longer be repaired. So I'm stripping it down, and up to this point I have got basically everything up front here: the suspension, wheels, tires, wiring harness from the 14. And I've moved that into this car along with the interior and all the trim pieces inside. And now I'm going to be taking basically everything that came up from underneath the 2014 and putting it into the V6 car. I'll just quickly go over these parts and why they're not compatible with the V6 and why I have to swap them out. So starting with the exhaust, of course the 5-liter dual exhaust is different than the single exhaust that was on the V6. When I tore it apart, I had to break a few of these bolts on the catalytic converter. They wouldn't come off. So getting the studs out wasn't too hard. As you can see, the metal is discolored there. Basically the rust is burnt off. That's because I had to get that little ear cherry red. And once it was red like that, I could pop out those studs. And I will be replacing those before I install it here. This piece went inside the transmission tunnel on the GT car. It looks like either heat or sound insulation, or maybe both. The V6 car never had any insulation in there, so I'll pop that in. Moving back a little bit further, you can see the 2-piece drive shaft. That too is unique to the GT cars. The V6 had a single-piece drive shaft. I'm sure this 2-piece is a lot stronger, and it's got CV joints in the middle and back compared to just a single U-joint that the V6 car had. Also too, the fuel line is different. The V6 car had inline fuel filter. This one doesn't, and the connections at both ends are different, and there's no place to break it up, so I've got to swap out the whole line. Also too, the black piece there, that's just a protector that went over the fuel line and the evap line and the brake lines that ran next to the frame rail. So that too is going to get swapped over. Moving towards the back here, the evap unit was very similar, but the electrical connections were different on it. So rather than just swapping out the connections, it wasn't a big deal to pull this out. So I'm going to change over the whole evap unit. Fuel tank, also quite different, same basic shape, but this one is plastic, where the V6 car had a metal one. Fuel pump is different in there. The connection going to the fuel pump, both electrical and the fuel line, are different, so that all needs to be swapped out. The straps that hold the fuel tank in place, I suspect they're different, so I'll swap them out as well. The GT car has a bigger ring gear and a heavier rear axle than what the V6 had, so that's all getting swapped out. Springs from the GT car are also coming over. I believe those are aftermarket springs that were in there. I think they lower the car a little bit, so I'm putting those in as well. The original V6 axle is now underneath this car, and it bolted in pretty easily, so I'm hoping that GT axle will go under the white car equally easily. Having 4 wheels on here, and also too, I put the parking brake back in so I can keep this thing from rolling away on me. This will allow me to move the car around and get it out of here when the time comes. But the only parts left to come off of this car for this project is the wiring harness inside the door. I'm going to take the mirrors off this car, off the doors, and move them over. And the interior door panels are going to get swapped over too. Once that's taken off, then I'm pretty much done with this car, and I can start parting it out or If someone wants a whole car, I'll sell the whole car that way. But it's given about all it can to this project. So now I'll start swapping these things over and I'll give some updates along the way. Well, making some progress. I got that piece of insulation installed up in the transmission tunnel. You can see it up there, it's black. And it was easy to install. You just take off those existing heat shields for around the exhaust system of the catalytic converter, and it slides underneath them and goes in place. I got the fuel line installed, and it too went in relatively simply. Just snapped in place using the old fittings from the 2009 here. Parking brake, got that reconnected again. I talked about that in a previous episode and trick on how to pull that apart. Gas tank is in, and I did have to change out these straps here to make it work. The straps from the 2009 didn't work. The way those straps go in is this little pin here, holds them in place, and to get it out you got to get that pin through that little hole. And I found the easiest way to do that was with a magnet. Just got it lined up and then use this magnet to pull it out of there, and that worked good. And I've got the evap unit installed, and I had a little problem with it, and I'll talk more about that. The reason I have a problem with it is because the gas fillers are different between the two cars. The 2014 has one of these gas fillers that there's no cap on, and the way it mounts inside the fender and everything is different. This whole quarter panel is different on the 2014 than it is on the 2009. On the 2009 it's recessed back like that. It would have been difficult to swap the fillers out, so I left this one as is. But the problem I encountered is the vent line that comes from the filler back into the evap unit had a different fitting on it, and so my solution was just to swap the fittings out. It's a little bit difficult because this line isn't a rubber line, it's kind of a hard rubber type thing, and I had to get it quite hot with a heat gun before I could pull this fitting out and swap the two fittings around. But it can be done. You just have to get it pretty good and warm, and then to reinstall the fitting back in, it's got to be warm as well, and it goes in and it seems to mold itself to that line. I used a heat gun, and I made sure that the evap unit wasn't connected to the gas tank because of potential fire, but that all worked out good. So anyway, what's next is drive shaft, exhaust, and rear end. Oh, and I forgot to mention too earlier that I'm swapping over the sway bar as well with the rear end. The sway bar is a larger diameter on the GT model. All the GT parts are now bolted up under this 2009 Mustang, and I'm feeling good about that. As you can see, I've got some nice chrome exhaust tips in the back. They're sticking out a little bit farther than what they will once I get the engine bolted in, because whole exhaust system will get pulled forward a little bit then. I did have to get some help putting in the exhaust system and the drive shaft. They're just too heavy to manage by myself here. So my brother came over and we did that. The drive shaft went in fairly simply. We did have to fight with the exhaust system on the driver's side here. I don't know if you can see that in there, yeah. Those holes were drilled for that bracket, but they weren't tapped. So we had to tap those. And like I say, I had to wrestle a little bit to get the whole thing in place, but it went in not too bad. The rear axle I was able to put in by myself, and I found the best sequence of events for that is to do the lower control arms first, get both of those hooked up, and then jack up the rear axle so the shocks can be put in. And after the shocks are put in, put a ratchet strap around the differential and pull down the top link up there. The top link is rubber mounted, and it's kind of a natural spring. It takes a little bit of force to pull it down. But you can pull it down to place with the ratchet strap, put that top bolt through, and then use another ratchet strap to get the axle positioned right, to get the track bar put in place. And then finally hook up the sway bar. And of course, pull off the wheels and hook up your parking brake and brake lines and all that type of stuff, ABS sensor. Now what I'll do is I'll lower this thing down so you can see how it sits with the new lowering springs, what the stance is like. Just going to walk around this side. I've been using this little scissor lift, and it works not bad. It would be nicer having a real two-post lift, but at least this lift here makes the job possible. I'll just lower it down now. Okay, she's down on the ground. Sorry about the noise. That jack is just holding the exhaust up a little bit to take some of the strain off. I think that looks pretty good. It is sitting lower than what it did with the V6 springs in it. V6 springs are now in this car here, and you can see how much higher it is. It's sitting higher than what it normally would, because there's really nothing in it. It's just a shell. But no, the stance is nice. The nose will come down a little bit when I put the 5 liter in there, so that will balance it out. I think it's got a nice profile there with the stance and larger tires. So next step is an exciting one. The 5 liter goes in. So stay tuned for that one. Thanks for watching.